The 1970s were a wild decade for cars, with many trying to take down the legendary Corvette. But not all challengers lived up to the hype. Some turned out to be complete failures, with bad designs, poor performance, and endless problems. Welcome to the channel. Today we're diving into the Lancia 13 crappiest Corvette killers of the 1970s. These cars aimed high but crashed hard. You won't believe how bad they really were. The TVR 3000M, produced from 1972 to 1979, was intended to be a quintessential British sports car. Lightweight, stylish, and packing enough punch to excite enthusiasts. Under the hood, it was powered by Ford's dependable 3.0-liter V6, delivering around 138 horsepower, a respectable figure for its time, especially when paired with the car's lightweight fiberglass body. Unfortunately, the promise of the 3,000 megabytes was often undermined by its myriad flaws, which tarnished its reputation and frustrated its owners. On paper, the TVR 3000M looked like a dream for those who sought individuality in a world of more mainstream cars. Its sleek, handcrafted design and driver-focused ethos appealed to enthusiasts who wanted something different from the likes of Triumph or MG. However, the very factors that made the 3000M stand out, its hand-built nature and reliance on bespoke parts, became the sources of its greatest weaknesses. Reliability was a constant Achilles heel for the 3000M. The car was plagued by electrical problems, which were exacerbated by TVR's inconsistent build quality. Wiring issues were common, with some owners reporting lights, wipers, and other essential systems failing without warning. Adding to the headaches, TVR's fiberglass body construction was prone to issues such as cracking, poor panel alignment, and rattles, all of which contributed to the perception that the car was hastily assembled. Another critical flaw was the 3000M's interior, which, while offering a sporty, minimalist charm, often felt poorly finished and prone to deterioration. Early examples featured low-quality materials, and the craftsmanship failed to meet the expectations set by competitors in the same price bracket. Owners frequently complained about rattles, loose fittings, and an overall sense that the car lacked refinement. In contrast, cars like the Porsche 914 or the Datsun 240Z offered better interiors, reliability, and, crucially, a more cohesive driving experience. While the Ford 3.0-liter V6 engine itself was generally robust, it wasn't free from criticism either. Many owners found it lacking in refinement, with vibrations and a gruff exhaust note that contrasted sharply with the smooth six-cylinder engines offered by rivals. Additionally, cooling system problems often led to overheating, especially during spirited driving, which somewhat undermined the car's performance-oriented image. Handling, though initially praised for its agility, also fell short when compared to the competition. The 3000M's lightweight design and rear-wheel drive layout gave it potential, but inconsistent suspension tuning and poor weight distribution often led to unpredictable behavior at the limit. It was a car that required careful, experienced hands to extract the best out of it, a trait that made it less appealing to more casual enthusiasts. Owner experiences with the 3000M were varied, but one common thread emerged: frustration. One owner remarked, "When it was working, the TVR 3000M was a joy to drive. It felt raw and connected, a proper British sports car. But getting to the point where it worked was the hard part." Another said, "I bought the 3000M for its looks and its promise of performance. What I got instead was a car that spent more time in the garage than on the road. Every fix led to discovering three more problems." Despite its issues, the TVR 3000M has earned a niche following among collectors and enthusiasts. Those who own and maintain them today often point to the car's unique character and the satisfaction of driving something rare and quirky. The 3000M wasn't just a car, it was an experience, albeit one that required patience and dedication to fully enjoy. For those willing to overlook its shortcomings, it offered a visceral driving experience that modern sports cars often lack. In hindsight, the TVR 3000M represents both the charm and the pitfalls of small-scale British car manufacturers in the 1970s. It was a car with great ambition but limited resources, and its faults often overshadowed its virtues. Today, it stands as a reminder of TVR's eccentric approach to car making, a piece of automotive history that, while flawed, still holds a certain allure for those who appreciate the unconventional. The Maserati Mora, produced from 1972 to 1983, was Maserati's attempt to deliver a mid-engine sports car that combined exotic styling, capable performance, and a slightly more approachable price tag than its flagship, the Bora. Designed by Giorgetto Giugiaro, the Mora boasted stunning wedge-shaped lines and a distinctive Italian flair that captured the automotive spirit of the 1970s. It shared much of its platform and design with the Bora, including its chassis and some suspension components, but where the Bora had a burly V8, the Mora was fitted with a 3.0-liter V6 engine. This allowed it to be lighter, less expensive, and theoretically more accessible. Unfortunately, the Mora's promising design was overshadowed by a slew of reliability, build quality, and maintenance issues that earned it a reputation for being as troublesome as it was beautiful. The Mora's V6 engine, derived from the Maserati-Citroën SM collaboration, produced up to 220 horsepower in its SS variant. On paper, this performance seemed respectable, especially given the car's lightweight construction and focus on balance rather than outright power. However, the engine struggled to deliver the visceral punch expected of a Maserati. It lacked the charisma of rival power plants from Ferrari and Lamborghini, leaving drivers underwhelmed. Moreover, the complex Citroën-sourced hydraulic systems used for brakes and steering were prone to failure, often requiring costly and specialized repairs that could keep the car off the road for extended periods. Another weak point was the hot transmission, also sourced from Citroën. While serviceable for regular driving, the gearbox was prone to clunky shifts and premature wear, particularly if driven hard, ironic for a car positioned as a sporty Grand Tourer. Many owners reported that finding mechanics capable of working on the Mora's idiosyncratic drivetrain was a significant challenge, and parts availability was another frequent headache. Beyond the drivetrain, the interior of the Mora left much to be desired. While Maserati attempted to create a luxurious cabin with leather upholstery and exotic touches, much of the interior was compromised by Citroën's influence. Switchgear and instrumentation were borrowed from Citroën's parts bin, which many enthusiasts felt was out of place in a car carrying the prestigious Maserati Trident emblem. Additionally, build quality was inconsistent, with poorly aligned panels and a propensity for rattles and squeaks developing over time. Ergonomics also suffered. Cramped seating, awkward pedal placement, and limited headroom left taller drivers struggling to get comfortable. One of the most persistent complaints about the Mora was its electrical system, a notorious Achilles heel for many Italian cars of the era. From faulty wiring to failing gauges and inoperative lights, the Mora was no stranger to electrical gremlins. This compounded its already challenging maintenance profile and contributed to its reputation as a high-maintenance diva rather than a reliable companion. Despite its faults, the sound and styling of the Mora remained its saving grace. The car's sleek proportions, pop-up headlights, and flying buttresses gave it an undeniably exotic appearance. It was a car that looked faster and more expensive than it actually was, and this helped attract buyers who were drawn to its aesthetic appeal. However, once the honeymoon period of ownership ended, many buyers found themselves struggling to justify the car's shortcomings. Owners' experiences with the Mora paint a vivid picture. One frustrated owner remarked, "I spent more time fixing the car than driving it. The moment you thought everything was sorted, something else would go wrong. It's a heartbreaker, really." Another shared, "When it's running right, the Mora is magical. The way it looks, the way it corners, it's a dream. But keeping it running right is an entirely different story. If you buy one, budget as much for maintenance as you did for the car itself." That said, the Mora still has its fans. For enthusiasts who are willing to invest time, money, and patience, the car offers a rewarding ownership experience. Its balanced handling, thanks to its mid-engine layout, can be genuinely enjoyable, especially when driving on curvy roads. The Mora SS variant, introduced in 1975, addressed some of the earlier model's performance shortcomings, offering improved power, revised suspension, and slightly more reliable mechanicals. In today's classic car market, the Maserati Mora has become a niche collectible. Its rarity, stunning design, and connection to Maserati's storied history make it a desirable choice for collectors with a tolerance for its flaws. However, prospective buyers must go in with their eyes wide open. The Mora is not for the faint of heart, and owning one is a test of both mechanical knowledge and financial commitment. The Porsche 914, produced from 1969 to 1976, was a collaborative effort between Volkswagen and Porsche aimed at creating a relatively affordable sports car. Positioned as an entry-level model for Porsche, the 914 was meant to appeal to a broader market while still carrying the prestige of the Porsche brand. In many ways, the 914 succeeded in its mission to provide an accessible sports car with impressive handling and an agile mid-engine layout. However, its execution left much to be desired in terms of both performance and perception. One of the key issues with the Porsche 914 was its design. While functional and efficient, the 914's appearance was often described as bland and unremarkable. The car's boxy, utilitarian lines lacked the flair and exotic appeal that Porsche was known for. Unlike the curvaceous 911, the 914 was more about practicality than style, and its low-slung, wedge-shaped body didn't turn heads in the same way. Many enthusiasts, especially those looking for the traditional sports car aesthetic, found the 914's design to be lacking in emotional appeal. Under the hood, the warbase engine options were a major letdown. The 914 started with a 1.7-liter inline-4 engine, which produced only around 80 horsepower. While this was adequate for a compact car, it was far from the performance Porsche enthusiasts were expecting. The lack of a potent engine made the 914 feel more like a VW than a Porsche, further contributing to its reputation as the cheap Porsche. For comparison, a 911 with its larger, more powerful engine offered a completely different level of performance. The 914's base model could barely keep up with other cars in its price range, which made it feel underwhelming for a car that carried the Porsche badge. Things improved somewhat with the 914/6 Maserati, which was equipped with a 2.0-liter flat-six engine derived from the Porsche 911. While this version provided more power and excitement, it was still overshadowed by the 911's performance and image. The 914/6 was expensive for what it offered, and many buyers preferred to spend the extra money on a more prestigious 911. The reputation of the 914 was another factor that contributed to its struggle. It was often seen as the poor man's Porsche due to its lower price point and association with Volkswagen. Despite its solid engineering, the 914 never fully shook off the image of being a lesser alternative to the more glamorous and powerful 911. This perception alienated many Porsche enthusiasts who were looking for a more traditional, high-performance sports car. In terms of handling, the 914 excelled. Its mid-engine layout, combined with its lightweight design and responsive suspension, made it a joy to drive through corners. It was nimble and well-balanced, offering a driving experience that was ahead of its time. However, the lack of power left it feeling underpowered on straights, and it never quite lived up to the performance potential that the Porsche name promised. Owner feedback about the 914 varied greatly. Some appreciated its excellent handling and affordable price, considering it a fun and reliable option for weekend drives. Others, however, were disappointed by its lack of power and prestige. One owner shared, "I love the way the 914 handled, but it never felt like a Porsche. It didn't have the power to back up the badge, and it always felt like something was missing." Another owner recalled, "The 914 was a great car for the right buyer, but if you were expecting a Porsche, you'd be let down. It didn't have the performance or the cachet to compete with the 911. Despite its shortcomings, the Porsche 914 has gained a certain cult following in recent years. Its reputation as the cheap Porsche has softened, with enthusiasts appreciating its simplicity, unique design, and driving dynamics. The 914's mid-engine layout has made it a popular choice for those seeking an affordable entry into the world of Porsche ownership, and it remains a fun, if flawed, alternative to the more expensive 911. Today, the 914 is considered a classic, with prices slowly rising as collectors recognize its potential as a unique piece of Porsche history. While it may not have been the iconic sports car that Porsche fans hoped for, the 914's handling and driving experience have earned it a place in the hearts of many enthusiasts. It remains an example of how a car with a humble beginning can still find a loyal following, even if it was never quite able to live up to the expectations of its time. The Panther J72 was one of those cars that, at first glance, seemed to promise the perfect blend of retro charm and luxury sports car performance, only to ultimately disappoint on almost every front. When I first laid eyes on the J72, I was mesmerized by its retro design, which harkened back to the elegance of 1930s roadsters. Its long bonnet, sweeping fenders, and vintage-style headlights made it appear as though it had time-traveled from a bygone era of automotive greatness. Inside, the car was equally captivating. A lavish interior with leather upholstery, polished wood panels, and chrome accents that spoke to an air of wealth and exclusivity. It had everything a person could desire from a luxury sports car: style, prestige, and the promise of an exceptional driving experience. But as I would come to learn, the Panther J72 was more of a showpiece than a true performance vehicle. And as much as it tried to live up to its aesthetic appeal, the driving experience left much to be desired. The first major issue I encountered was the performance. Panther Westwinds, the manufacturer, touted the J72 as a high-performance car, but that promise was never truly realized. Under the hood, the J72 was equipped with a V6 engine, either a 2.8-liter or later a 4.2-liter version, which on paper seemed like it should deliver adequate power for a sports car of its time. In reality, however, the engine was woefully underpowered for a car of this price range. The acceleration was sluggish at best, and the car lacked the kind of raw power and speed I was expecting. The lack of real performance became painfully obvious when I tried to push the car on the highway. The engine simply couldn't deliver the punch I was looking for, and no amount of pushing the accelerator could make up for the lack of response. For a car that was supposed to make an impression, it often felt like it was struggling to keep up with traffic, and that left me frustrated, especially considering the price tag it carried. What made this even worse was the fact that the car's design promised something sporty, but it didn't have the driving dynamics to match. Handling was heavy and unresponsive, and while it looked like a car built for excitement, it didn't deliver that experience. The steering felt cumbersome, and the suspension, though it might have been comfortable for cruising on smooth roads, couldn't handle corners with the agility or confidence I wanted from a sports car. For a car that looked like it should be tearing through the streets, the J72 instead felt more like a glorified cruiser, a machine that looked fast but was anything but. The interior, though opulent, didn't do much to make up for the lack of driving enjoyment. Yes, the leather seats were comfortable, and the wooden panels were a nice touch, but these features couldn't mask the fact that driving this car was more of a chore than a thrill. The cramped cabin was especially uncomfortable on long drives. Despite the car's classic looks, it didn't have the ergonomic touches that modern vehicles often provide, and the interior space felt claustrophobic at times. As someone who enjoys long drives, I found myself dreading anything beyond a short trip in this car. Maneuvering the J72 was another challenge I hadn't anticipated. The car's high rear end, combined with its relatively poor visibility, made parking and navigating tight spaces a hassle. I often found myself craning my neck and struggling to judge distances. For a vehicle that was clearly designed to be an eye-catching roadster, its practicality was severely lacking, which made it impractical for everyday use, especially in crowded urban areas where precise parking and handling are essential. Then there were the maintenance issues. Owning a car like the Panther J72 came with its own set of challenges. Parts were expensive and often difficult to come by. As a result, keeping the car in good running condition became a costly and time-consuming task. I had to rely on specialized mechanics who were familiar with the J72, which was a rare breed of car, making it even harder to find reliable service. Given the already high purchase price of the car, these additional expenses made owning the J72 feel more like a financial burden than a privilege. In the end, what started as a dream car turned into a constant reminder of how looks can be deceiving. The Panther J72 looked the part, a stunning retro sports car with all the elegance of the golden age of motoring. But when it came to performance, handling, and overall driving experience, it simply didn't live up to the hype. I had hoped for a car that would not only turn heads but also deliver on the road. Unfortunately, it became apparent that the J72 was more about style than substance. It was a car built for show, not for go, and that left me with a sense of regret. Despite its stunning exterior and luxurious interior, the Panther J72 was, for me, the worst car I've ever owned. The Lancia Stratos. 1973 to 1978 is often regarded as one of the most iconic rally cars in history. Its name synonymous with the raw power and precision required to dominate the World Rally Championship, WRC. Designed by the brilliant minds at Lancia and with input from legendary car designer Marcello Gandini, the same designer behind the Lamborghini Mora and Countach. The Stratos was a radical departure from traditional rally cars of the time. Its mid-engine, rear-wheel drive layout and lightweight fiberglass body made it a formidable competitor, and its wedge-shaped design became a symbol of innovation and performance in motorsport. In the world of rallying, the Stratos was nothing short of legendary. It wasn't just a participant in the WRC, it defined the sport during the 1970s. The car's 2.4-liter V6 engine, producing around 190 horsepower, was enough to make it a dominant force on gravel and snow-covered rally stages. The Stratos won 3 consecutive WRC manufacturers' titles from 1974 to 1976 and became the car to beat in the sport, forever cementing its place in rally history. However, while the Stratos was engineered to conquer the rough and unpredictable rally stages, its adaptation for road use was far less successful. The Stratos wasn't just a rally car that happened to be sold to the public, it was a race car at heart, and that reality became abundantly clear the moment you tried to drive it on regular roads. For those who were looking for a street car with racing pedigree, the Stratos was undeniably captivating in terms of looks and engineering. But when it came to everyday driving, it proved to be a difficult and impractical machine. One of the most immediate issues with the Lancia Stratos on the road was its stiff, uncompromising suspension, which was designed to handle the toughest of rally terrains, but felt incredibly harsh on smooth tarmac. It wasn't a suspension that could absorb the bumps and irregularities of daily driving. Instead, every pothole, every crack in the road was felt with bone-jarring intensity. The ride was incredibly uncomfortable, and even a short drive felt like a series of jolts and shocks. The low ride height, which worked perfectly on rally stages with their uneven surfaces, meant that driving the Stratos on regular streets felt like a never-ending battle with the pavement. For anyone used to more comfortable, forgiving cars, the Stratos was a punishing experience. The car's handling, while razor-sharp on rally courses, didn't translate well to everyday roads either. The steering was incredibly quick, and the rear-engine layout, while perfect for rallying, made the car feel unpredictable and twitchy. The rear end could easily get away from you if you weren't paying attention, especially when driving on public roads with varying conditions. The car demanded constant focus and precision, something that was fine for professional drivers on the rally stages, but for everyday motorists, it became a handful. It wasn't a car you could just hop into and take for a relaxed drive. It was a car that required your full attention, skill, and experience to handle safely. For anyone who wasn't a rally driver, the Stratos was simply not an easy car to live with on a daily basis. Beyond the driving experience, the Lancia Stratos was also far from practical. Its low ground clearance made navigating anything other than smooth roads a challenge, and even simple tasks like getting in and out of the car were made difficult by its race-oriented design. The interior, while designed for lightness and racing efficiency, was cramped and sparse. It wasn't designed for comfort, it was designed for speed. There were no luxury features to speak of. No air conditioning, no power windows, no fancy infotainment system. The cockpit was stripped down, with minimal padding on the seats and a no-nonsense dashboard that looked more at home in a race car than on the street. Cargo space was virtually non-existent, and the small boot area meant that you couldn't even fit a bag of groceries without struggling. For someone who wanted a car that could double as a weekend getaway vehicle or even a family car, the Stratos was utterly impractical. It was a car that made every small errand feel like a chore, and the idea of taking it on a long road trip was laughable. In terms of maintenance, the Stratos was also a costly venture. The parts were hard to come by, especially for a car that was produced in limited numbers, and getting the car serviced required finding a mechanic who knew how to work on such a rare and specialized machine. The Stratos, built for rally enthusiasts and collectors, was not a car that many ordinary drivers could afford to maintain properly. The costs associated with keeping it in running condition often outweighed any joy derived from owning it. In the end, while the Lancia Stratos was an absolute legend on the rally stage, the Russia Fiat 124 Sport Spider, 1966 to 1985, is a car that, for many, represents the ideal blend of European style, open-air driving, and an affordable price point. Designed by the legendary Pininfarina and based on the Fiat 124, the Sport Spider was a two-seat roadster that became a popular choice for those looking for a fun and stylish convertible. With its sleek lines, iconic chrome bumpers, and compact size, it looked the part of a classic European sports car, offering the kind of effortless, sun-soaked driving experience that enthusiasts dream of. Under the hood, the 124 Sport Spider was powered by a 1.4-liter engine, which, while not particularly powerful, was adequate for the car's size and design. It was nimble and responsive, and for many drivers, the joy of driving was more about the experience of being on the road rather than raw speed. The car's handling, with its rear-wheel drive and relatively lightweight, made it a pleasure to toss around corners, and its smooth manual transmission only added to the driving fun. It had the charm of a classic roadster, a car that was meant to be driven for the sheer joy of driving. However, the Fiat 124 Sport Spider was not without its issues. While its design was attractive and its driving dynamics were solid, the car was plagued by a number of mechanical problems that quickly became apparent once you were the owner. The most notable and frustrating issue was key rusticana. Like many cars of its era, the Fiat 124 Sport Spider was highly prone to corrosion, especially in areas with wet or salty climates. The car's bodywork, while stylish, was not built to withstand the ravages of time and exposure to the elements, and it wasn't uncommon for owners to find themselves battling rust spots that would spread across the body, especially around the wheel arches, sills, and undercarriage. This issue became so widespread that many 124 Sport Spiders were eventually deemed unworthy of repair due to the extent of the corrosion. Another significant problem with the Fiat 124 Sport Spider was its electrical system. The car's electrical components were notoriously unreliable, with the electrical wiring prone to failure over time. It wasn't uncommon for owners to face issues such as flickering lights, faulty alternators, or even complete electrical breakdowns that left them stranded. For a car that was supposed to be an enjoyable weekend cruiser, the constant fear of electrical failure was a major source of frustration. Additionally, the mechanical issues with the Fiat 124 Sport Spider made ownership a costly and frustrating experience. The car's engine and transmission, while adequate when they were working properly, had a tendency to develop problems over time. The engines were known to suffer from oil leaks, overheating issues, and general wear and tear. Parts were often difficult to source and repairs could be costly, especially for those who weren't handy with car maintenance themselves. For a car that was supposed to provide carefree motoring, it ended up being more of a money pit, with owners constantly having to repair or replace components just to keep the car on the road. Even the car's showy interior one of the Fiat 124 Sport Spider wasn't immune to wear and tear. The seats, while comfortable at first, didn't age well, with many owners complaining of cracking or worn upholstery. The dashboard, made of relatively cheap materials, could also become brittle over time. The lack of modern amenities like air conditioning or advanced audio systems meant that the car's interior felt rather basic compared to other roadsters of the era, especially given the mechanical problems that plagued it. While the Fiat 124 Sports Spider's classic charm and driving experience certainly made it appealing, these persistent issues made ownership far less enjoyable in the long run. The car was fun to drive, but it required constant attention, both in terms of maintenance and repairs. For those looking for a car that would require minimal upkeep, the Fiat 124 Sports Spider was a poor choice. The combination of rust, electrical failures, and mechanical issues turned what could have been a delightful ownership experience into a costly and frustrating endeavor. In summary, the Fiat 124 Sports Spider had all the makings of a classic roadster. It was stylish, fun to drive, and embodied the spirit of European motoring. But these qualities were overshadowed by the car's inherent flaws, making it a difficult car to own for anyone who didn't have the time, money, or mechanical knowledge to keep it running. While its charm was undeniable, the 124 Sports Spider's reputation for rust, electrical failures, and mechanical issues meant that ownership could quickly become a costly and never-ending cycle of repairs. For many, the joy of driving was short-lived, and the Fiat 124 Sports Spider ended up being a car that, despite its initial appeal, ultimately became a frustrating and expensive endeavor. The Chevrolet Corvette C3, 1968 to 1982, is a car that has earned its place in the annals of automotive history as an iconic symbol of American muscle. With its long, sweeping hood, dramatic lines, and shark styling, the C3 Corvette was the epitome of performance and flair when it debuted in 1968. Designed by the legendary Larry Shinoda and inspired by the Mako Shark 2 concept, the C3 was a stunning visual achievement, drawing attention wherever it went. Under the hood, it offered a range of V8 engines, including big blocks like the 427 and 454 cubic inch powerhouses, delivering breathtaking performance for those behind the wheel. It was fast, stylish, and offered that quintessential American muscle car experience. But while the C3 Corvette started with undeniable promise, it quickly faced a series of challenges that would dull its performance and tarnish its once glorious reputation. The car was not immune to the changes sweeping through the automotive world, particularly the introduction of stricter emissions regulations and the fuel crises of the 1970s. By the mid-1970s, the Corvette's performance began to suffer. Emission controls were choking the power out of the V8 engines that had once made the car a performance powerhouse. Horsepower dropped significantly, and the once thrilling acceleration was diminished by the addition of smog equipment and lower compression ratios. Adding to this were the global oil crises that made gas-guzzling sports cars less desirable. With fuel prices soaring, the Corvette's thirst for gasoline became harder to justify, especially for buyers who wanted something that could still deliver performance without draining their wallets at the pump. In addition to the performance decline, the C3 Corvette became plagued by quality control issues. The interior, which had once been seen as a symbol of refinement, began to suffer. Cheap plastics replaced the more luxurious materials of earlier models, and the fit and finish became more inconsistent. The build quality in general started to falter, leading to a car that often felt more like a mass-produced vehicle than the precision-crafted machine it was intended to be. Reliability also became a significant issue. The C3 Corvette's cooling system, in particular, was a weak point. Overheating became a common problem, especially with the more powerful engines, as the car struggled to dissipate heat during long drives or in hot weather. The performance that once felt exhilarating became a source of frustration, as owners had to deal with overheating engines, mechanical failures, and the constant need for repairs. The ride, too, suffered due to a suspension system that wasn't built to handle the weight and power of the larger engines, making the car uncomfortable on anything but smooth, flat roads. By the early 1980s, the C3 Corvette had become a shadow of its former self. Despite some updates to the engine and body, it still lacked the performance and refinement that had made earlier models so desirable. The shark styling, once so bold and fresh, now felt outdated, and the car's competitive edge had been dulled by years of compromise. While still recognizable and loved by enthusiasts, the Corvette C3 became more of a symbol of what could have been, rather than a cutting-edge performance machine. In my experience owning a mid-1970s C3 Corvette, the reality of living with the car was far less glamorous than its appearance would suggest. I fell in love with the way it looked, sleek, aggressive, and undeniably American. But driving it was a different story. The drop in power was immediately noticeable. The acceleration, which should have been thrilling, was lethargic, and the engine felt more like a faint echo of its former self. I had hoped to feel that raw performance every time I pressed the gas pedal, but instead, I was met with sluggishness. The overheating issue became a constant concern. Even during short drives, I had to keep a close eye on the temperature gauge, fearing that the engine would overheat and leave me stranded. The ride, which I had imagined would be comfortable and exhilarating, was harsh and jittery, with every bump in the road reminding me that this car was no longer a finely tuned performance machine. I also had to deal with the constant mechanical issues, from the cooling system to the electrical components. It felt like I was always in the shop, pouring money into a car that in theory should have been the pinnacle of American engineering. As time went on, I found myself growing frustrated with the car. It had the looks, but it lacked the performance and reliability that had made the Corvette a legend. The C3 Corvette became less of a joy to own and more of a constant project, always requiring attention and money. What I had once hoped would be an exciting, carefree driving experience turned into a series of repairs, setbacks, and disappointments. The Ferrari Dyno 308 GT4, 1973 to 1980, was a significant departure for Ferrari, marking the first time a mid-engine V8 was offered under the Dyno sub-brand. Intended to offer a more affordable Ferrari experience, the Dyno 308 GT4 was positioned as a step toward broadening Ferrari's appeal without compromising performance. The car was powered by a 3.0-liter V8 engine, producing around 240 horsepower, which gave it impressive acceleration and handling for its time. It was a true sports car with a reputation for excellent driving dynamics, including superb balance and agility, thanks to its mid-engine layout. The Ferrari Dyno 308 GT4 had all the right ingredients on paper: a high-performance engine, sleek bodywork, and the promise of Ferrari's legendary driving experience. However, despite its technical prowess, the 308 GT4 faced significant challenges, particularly when it came to styling and reliability, which marred its potential as a true Ferrari success. Designed by the renowned Italian firm Bertone, the car's looks were the subject of intense debate. Unlike the more traditional and curvaceous Ferrari designs of the era, the 308 GT4 sported a sharply angular, almost boxy appearance that was, at the time, ahead of its time, but didn't resonate with many Ferrari enthusiasts. It lacked the graceful curves and iconic design language that had become synonymous with the Ferrari brand. While some later came to appreciate its distinctive lines, many buyers were put off by its unusual design, and the car's looks have remained a polarizing topic ever since. It simply didn't have the aesthetic appeal of its contemporaries, such as the 246 GT Dino, or the more popular 308 GTS that followed. The 308 GT4's divisive styling was only one part of the problem. Ferrari's notorious reliability issues also plagued the Dyno 308 GT4, as they did with many cars from the brand during this era. While the engine was capable and offered impressive performance, the car's complex mechanical systems often required frequent attention. The mid-engine layout, while great for handling, was challenging when it came to routine maintenance, and the car's intricate systems made repairs costly and time-consuming. Problems with the electrical system, fuel injection, and cooling system were common, meaning that owners frequently found themselves dealing with frustrating and expensive breakdowns. The frequent need for repairs added to the financial burden of ownership, making the Dyno 308 GT4 a constant drain on its owners' wallets. Another issue with the Dyno 308 GT4 was its ride quality and interior. While the car's performance on the road was commendable, its interior wasn't as refined as one might expect from a Ferrari. The interior materials were not of the same high standard as those found in other Ferrari models, with cheap plastics and a somewhat cramped and uncomfortable cabin. The seats, while supportive, weren't as luxurious as one would expect from a car of this pedigree. In addition, the driving position wasn't ideal for everyone, and some found the visibility challenging, especially when parking or navigating tight spaces. This lack of refinement added to the sense that the Dino 308 GT4 was not fully living up to the premium expectations set by Ferrari. For many owners, the combination of unreliable mechanics, a polarizing design, and poor build quality turned the Dino 308 GT4 into a financial and emotional burden. While the car offered excellent performance on the road, the constant upkeep, high repair costs, and the car's inability to meet the high standards expected of a Ferrari made it a less than ideal ownership experience. Unlike other Ferrari models, which often offered better value for money and more rewarding ownership experiences, the Dino 308 GT4 was more of a gamble, one that could easily result in a significant financial loss. Owner's perspective. As an owner of the Ferrari Dino 308 GT4, I can say without a doubt that my experience with this car was far more challenging than I anticipated. The performance was undoubtedly there, the handling was superb, and the engine offered plenty of power for a thrilling drive. But that was where the enjoyment started to fade. The first thing that hit me when I got behind the wheel was how cramped and uncomfortable the interior was. As a Ferrari, I expected a certain level of refinement, but what I got was a mixture of cheap materials and a driving position that never quite felt right. The controls were stiff and visibility was poor, which made driving in everyday conditions much less enjoyable than I had hoped. Then there was the styling. I understand that Bertone's design was meant to be bold and different, but I just couldn't get past how awkward and angular it looked. It didn't have the Ferrari elegance that I had admired in other models. It always felt like I was driving a car that didn't quite fit in with the rest of Ferrari's lineup. The Datsun 260Z two-seater, 1974 to 1975, was introduced as a follow-up to the highly successful 240Z, a car that had taken the sports car world by storm with its blend of style, performance, and affordability. The 260Z, as the name suggests, featured a larger 2.6-liter engine, offering more power than the 240Z's 2.4-liter unit. At first glance, this might seem like a natural evolution. More power, more performance, and a continuation of the Z car legacy. However, in practice, the 260Z failed to live up to the expectations set by its predecessor, becoming a disappointment for many of its owners. While the 240Z was celebrated for its lightweight and nimble handling, the 260Z suffered from increased weight, which had a significant impact on its agility and overall driving dynamics. The addition of the larger engine, while it provided more displacement, also made the car heavier and less responsive in terms of handling. The car's balance and cornering ability, which had been one of the 240Z's standout features, were compromised in the 260Z. The driving experience, once characterized by sharp steering and a sense of connectedness to the road, was dulled by the increased mass. On top of that, the 260Z's engine, despite its larger displacement, didn't quite deliver the power boost that would have made the car a worthy upgrade. Early reviews of the 260Z highlighted that the extra weight negated much of the additional power, resulting in a car that didn't feel significantly faster than the 240Z. The performance upgrade was, in many ways, underwhelming, leaving enthusiasts hoping for a more noticeable leap in driving excitement. Carburetor issues were another frustrating aspect of the 260Z. The car was equipped with a pair of carburetors that struggled with tuning and reliability. These carburetors were prone to misfiring and required constant adjustments to keep the engine running smoothly. This was a source of ongoing frustration for owners, as the carburetors would often require fine-tuning and repairs, leading to reliability issues that were not common in other performance cars of the time. The need for regular maintenance made the 260Z less enjoyable to drive, as it required more attention than what was reasonable for a car of its class. Another issue was the reduced performance compared to the 240Z. The 240Z had set a high bar in terms of driving excitement, with a relatively lightweight body and sharp handling. The 260Z, on the other hand, felt heavier and less agile, making it a more cumbersome car to drive. The increased weight, coupled with the carburetor issues, meant that the 260Z didn't have the same level of spirited performance that had made the 240Z a true enthusiast car. Despite the bigger engine, the 260Z just didn't deliver the thrills that its predecessor had. The overall result was that the 260Z, while still a capable car, failed to live up to the legacy of the 240Z. It was a huge step backward in terms of handling, performance, and reliability, making it a tough sell for many who had already fallen in love with the 240Z's nimble nature. As a follow-up to a groundbreaking sports car, the 260Z didn't bring enough to the table to justify its existence in the way that its predecessor had. The rear. Owner's perspective. As an owner of a 260Z, I can say that my experience with the car was a frustrating one. When I first got it, I had high hopes. The 240Z was a legend, and I expected the 260Z to be a worthy successor with more power and refinement. Instead, what I got was a car that didn't feel quite as sharp or responsive as I had hoped. The extra weight made the handling feel sluggish, and the car no longer felt as nimble or as connected to the road. The joy of driving a lightweight, agile car like the 240Z was lost in the 260Z, which just felt heavier and less athletic. The carburetor issues were another major headache. It seemed like I was constantly fiddling with the carburetors to keep the engine running smoothly. Sometimes it would misfire, other times it would run rich or lean, and getting it tuned properly was always a hassle. I spent more time under the hood than I'd ever anticipated, and it was clear that the engine just wasn't as reliable as it should have been. The constant tinkering took away from the enjoyment of driving the car, as I was always worried about whether it would start or run properly. Despite the larger engine, the performance just wasn't there. I had expected the 260Z to be a significant step up from the 240Z, but it didn't feel that way. The car was still fast, don't get me wrong, but it didn't have the same urgency or excitement. The extra weight sapped much of the car's performance potential, and I couldn't help but feel like I was driving a heavier, less engaging car than what I had hoped for. The driving experience was more of a chore than the thrilling experience I had hoped for when I upgraded. The Jensen Healey, 1972 to 1976, was an ambitious attempt by the British manufacturer Jensen Motors to produce a sporty, affordable convertible that could compete with the likes of the MGB and Triumph Spitfire. It was powered by a 2.0-liter Lotus-designed engine, making it a step up from the smaller engines found in its competitors, offering decent performance for a car of its size. The car's design was sleek and stylish, with a fiberglass body that helped keep weight down, and it had the potential to be a fun and stylish roadster for driving enthusiasts. The Jensen Healey aimed to combine the charm of a British convertible with a touch of exotic appeal through its Lotus engine, all packaged in a car that was easy to handle and relatively affordable. However, despite its initial promise, the Jensen Healey became infamous for a multitude of serious issues that made ownership a nightmare for many buyers. Perhaps the biggest drawback of the Jensen Healey was its engine. While the Lotus 907 engine was designed with performance in mind, it had major reliability problems, leading to frequent engine failures. Many owners reported catastrophic engine failures, with the Lotus engine having issues ranging from overheating to complete seizures. The engine's poor build quality was a major flaw, and it didn't take long for many owners to experience the frustration of either having to rebuild or replace the engine entirely. This not only made the car unreliable, but also a major financial burden, as repairs were costly and time-consuming. In addition to the engine failures, the oil leaks became a recurring issue for the Jensen Healey. The car's seals and gaskets were often inadequate, leading to constant oil leaks that required frequent repairs and maintenance. These oil leaks were frustrating for owners as they not only created messes under the car, but also caused concerns about the long-term health of the engine. In some cases, the oil leaks would lead to more serious engine issues, compounding the car's reliability problems. For a car that was supposed to be a fun, reliable roadster, these constant issues made the ownership experience far more stressful than it should have been. Another major issue with the Jensen Healey was its narrow, low-quality interior. Despite its sporty appearance, the interior felt cheap and poorly constructed, which was a far cry from the luxurious cabins found in more expensive competitors. The seats were uncomfortable, and the materials used throughout the cabin were subpar, often deteriorating quickly. The dashboard and controls were flimsy, and over time, many of the interior features began to rattle or break entirely. This lack of attention to detail in the interior made the Jensen Healey feel like a car that was thrown together hastily rather than a well-built quality roadster. The overall build quality of the Jensen Healey was another area where it fell short. The fiberglass body, while light, was prone to cracking, and the construction was often inconsistent, with poor fitment of panels and body parts. Many owners reported issues with the car's alignment and the quality of the materials used in its construction. Given that the car was designed to be an affordable roadster, these build quality issues became significant headaches for owners, who found themselves dealing with misaligned panels, loose trim, in a car that never quite felt like it was built to last. Finally, the handling of the Jensen Healey, while decent, did not match up to its competitors. Despite having a relatively lightweight design, the car's suspension system was often criticized for being too stiff, leading to a bumpy and uncomfortable ride, especially over rough roads. The car's steering was also described as being vague and lacking the precision that enthusiasts would expect from a sports car, making the driving experience feel less responsive than it should have been. Owner's perspective. As an owner of a Jensen Healey, I can say without a doubt that my experience was far from the enjoyable sports car ownership I had envisioned. The promise of a lightweight, stylish roadster with a Lotus engine quickly faded as I began dealing with one issue after another. The engine, which I thought would be the car's strongest point, ended up being my biggest headache. I had to deal with multiple engine failures, and it seemed like the Lotus-designed engine was always on the brink of giving out. The constant oil leaks were another issue that never seemed to end. I was always checking the oil level, and the mess it left on my driveway was embarrassing. Even after repairing the leaks, it wasn't long before they would start again. It wasn't just inconvenient, it was a financial drain. The cost of repairing or replacing the engine made me seriously question my decision to buy the car. The interior, which should have been an enjoyable place to spend time, was just as disappointing. The Lotus Europa, 1966 to 1975, was a groundbreaking car for its time, offering a mid-engine layout in a lightweight, compact package. The car was designed with the idea of providing a pure driving experience, focusing on lightness, agility, and performance. It had a sleek, low-slung body that seemed futuristic and cutting-edge in the 1960s. The Europa was powered by a small, 1.5-liter, four-cylinder engine, originally from the Renault 16, and was renowned for its balance and handling, thanks to the mid-engine configuration. This made it a favorite among enthusiasts who appreciated its low weight and nimble dynamics, making it feel like a true driver's car. However, despite the promise of performance and its striking design, the Lotus Europa proved to be a disappointment for many owners. While it might have seemed like an automotive marvel, the reality of ownership revealed a number of serious flaws that made the car less desirable in practice. One of the biggest issues with the Lotus Europa was its cramped and uncomfortable interior. The car's small size and low-slung design left little room for comfort. The driving position was tight, with minimal headroom and legroom, especially for taller individuals. The seats were narrow and not very supportive, and the cabin felt more like a racing car than a road-going vehicle. This lack of comfort was compounded by the fact that getting in and out of the Europa required a certain level of contortion, making it inconvenient for daily driving or longer journeys. The interior was also basic, with few amenities, and many components felt cheap and flimsy, particularly considering the price of the car. Reliability was another major issue. Despite its impressive handling and performance on paper, the Europa often let owners down with its mechanical flaws. The car's build quality was inconsistent, and many owners reported problems with the electrical system, as well as issues with the engine and suspension. The Europa's engine, while adequate for performance, was prone to overheating and had difficulty maintaining consistent power delivery. Additionally, the car's fiberglass body, while lightweight and innovative at the time, was prone to cracking and deteriorating over time, leading to maintenance challenges. These mechanical issues became a constant source of frustration for owners, who often found themselves at the mechanic far more than they expected. The Europa's styling, while considered revolutionary at the time, didn't age well in the eyes of many. While it was sleek and futuristic when it debuted, the proportions and design elements soon started to feel dated. The low roofline and narrow stance, combined with the unique rear-end treatment, were polarizing features that not everyone appreciated. While it certainly stood out in the crowd of sports cars, its unconventional looks didn't appeal to as wide an audience as Lotus had hoped. Another significant issue was the drivability. While the Europa was lauded for its agility and precise handling, the car's performance was somewhat compromised by its power-to-weight ratio. The engine, though efficient for its size, was underpowered for the car's performance aspirations. The 1.5-liter engine, which made around 85 horsepower in the standard version, struggled to deliver the level of acceleration that many sports car enthusiasts expected from a mid-engine car. While the Europa was nimble on tight, twisty roads, it lacked the outright power and speed that could compete with other sports cars of its era. Turn, owner's perspective. As an owner of a Lotus Europa, I can say that the experience of owning this car was far from the idealized version I had imagined. On paper, it seemed like the perfect car, lightweight, agile, and built for performance. But in practice, it quickly became clear that there were significant compromises I hadn't anticipated. First and foremost, the interior was a major letdown. As someone who's on the taller side, I struggled to get comfortable behind the wheel. The driving position was cramped, with very little room to stretch out. The low roofline made it feel like I was sitting in a cramped cockpit, and getting in and out of the car was an exercise in contortion. I often felt like I was fighting the car just to get comfortable, and that made long drives or even short trips less enjoyable than I had hoped. Then there were the mechanical issues. Despite the car's fantastic handling, I found myself spending more time at the mechanic than on the road. The electrical system was unreliable, and I had constant issues with the engine. It would often overheat, and at times it just didn't have the power I expected from a mid-engine car. The fiberglass body, while lightweight, had cracks that would appear seemingly out of nowhere, and repairing them was a challenge. The Triumph Spitfire 1500, 1974 to 1980, was a small, lightweight two-seat roadster that aimed to offer an affordable and enjoyable driving experience. With its classic roadster styling, the Spitfire was an appealing option for those looking for an inexpensive open-top sports car. It featured a 1.5-liter inline-4 engine, an upgrade from the previous 1300cc units, which provided a modest boost in performance. The Spitfire 1500's handling was nimble, and its small size made it fun to throw around tight corners, making it a good choice for spirited driving on twisty roads. With its lightweight build and compact dimensions, the Spitfire had the makings of an enjoyable sports car for those on a budget. However, despite its potential, the Triumph Spitfire 1500 quickly became known for its underwhelming performance and numerous flaws that hindered its appeal. The car's hard engine, while offering a slight increase in displacement, remained underpowered for the weight and design of the car. With only about 71 horsepower on tap, the Spitfire 1500 was slow, with sluggish acceleration and a lack of power on the highway. The extra displacement did little to make up for the engine's shortcomings, and the Spitfire's top speed was disappointingly low compared to rivals. Its performance simply couldn't compete with more powerful competitors like the MG Midget or Datsun 240Z, which offered better acceleration and more engaging driving experiences. Another major issue with the Spitfire was its build quality. Triumph's cars were notorious for having inconsistent quality control, and the Spitfire 1500 was no exception. The interior materials felt cheap, with brittle plastics and low-grade upholstery that would often deteriorate over time. Components like the dashboard, door panels, and trim pieces felt flimsy and prone to wear. Even the car's exterior showed signs of poor craftsmanship, with many owners reporting misaligned body panels and other cosmetic flaws that detracted from the car's overall appearance. The rust-charn problem was one of the Spitfire 1500's most persistent issues. Like many British cars of the era, the Spitfire was prone to rust, especially in the body panels and undercarriage. The car's relatively thin metal construction made it susceptible to corrosion, and by the time many Spitfires reached the 10-year mark, rust had often become a serious issue. This was particularly problematic for owners who lived in regions with damp climates or salted roads during winter. Rust could spread quickly, leading to costly repairs and a shortened lifespan for the vehicle. In addition to the rust, the handling of the Spitfire was a mixed bag. While it was light and agile, the suspension setup was often described as too soft, leading to a floaty, unrefined ride, especially at higher speeds. The car's rear suspension design, which was based on a simple live axle, was another weak point that contributed to less than ideal handling dynamics. It wasn't particularly precise, and on rough or uneven roads, the Spitfire could feel bouncy or unsettled. While it was fun to drive on tight, twisty back roads, it didn't offer the level of composure and confidence that other roadsters of the time, such as the MG/MGB, were known for. Finally, the hot interior space in the Spitfire was cramped, with little room for tall drivers or passengers. The low-slung seats and small cabin made long drives uncomfortable, and many owners found it difficult to get comfortable in the car. The lack of modern amenities such as air conditioning or power steering made the car feel more like a budget option than a true sports car. While it had a certain charm and was certainly fun for short drives, it didn't offer the level of refinement or comfort that some of its competitors provided. Owner's perspective. As a former owner of a Triumph Spitfire 1500, I can say that while the car was undeniably charming, it was also a constant source of frustration. When I first bought the Spitfire, I was drawn to its classic roadster design and the idea of owning a small, nimble car that I could enjoy on weekend drives. And to be fair, there were moments when it was fun. The car's handling was decent on tight, twisty roads, and there's something inherently fun about driving a car that feels so connected to the road. However, the performance was disappointing. Despite the engine upgrade, the Spitfire 1500 still felt sluggish. The acceleration was lackluster, and at highway speeds it felt like the car was struggling to keep up. I found myself constantly wishing for more power, especially when merging onto highways or trying to keep up with traffic. It never had the punch I was hoping for in a sports car, and that was a big letdown. The Mora build quality was another major issue. The interior, while simple, felt cheap and worn out very quickly. The dashboard cracked, the seat covers started to peel, and the door panels began to sag. The Bricklin SV1, 1974 to 1976, was a bold attempt at creating an innovative sports coupe that stood out in the automotive landscape of the 1970s. Designed by Canadian entrepreneur Malcolm Bricklin, the SV1 was marketed as a futuristic sports car with unique features that set it apart from anything else on the road. Most notably, the SV1 featured gull-wing doors, a design element that instantly made the car more visually striking and appealed to those looking for something different from the more traditional sports cars of the era. The car's body was made of reinforced plastic, which was intended to make it lightweight yet strong, and the interior boasted luxurious features, positioning the Bricklin as a high-end performance vehicle. However, despite its innovative design and lofty ambitions, the Bricklin SV1 quickly earned a reputation for being a flawed and underwhelming car. The first major issue with the SV1 was its performance. Despite its aggressive looks, the SV1 was powered by a weak 5.8-liter V8 engine, which produced only 220 horsepower. This was far too little power for a car that weighed over 3,000 pounds, making the Bricklin slow and underperforming when compared to its contemporaries, such as the Corvette or other muscle cars of the time. The car's acceleration was sluggish, and its top speed barely passed the 120 mph mark. This lack of power and performance was a significant letdown, especially for a sports car that looked like it should have been able to deliver more. The car's weight was another major problem. The Bricklin SV1, at 3,000 pounds, was heavier than many of its rivals, which hurt its handling and overall driving experience. The reinforced plastic body, while offering some benefits in terms of strength, was not as lightweight as intended. This bulkiness led to poor agility and made the car feel cumbersome on the road, especially in tight corners or during spirited driving. The SV1's handling was far less precise and enjoyable than many other performance vehicles, which made it less appealing to driving enthusiasts. One of the biggest hurdles the Bricklin faced was quality control. The high production costs associated with the car were not reflected in the quality of the finished product. Many early buyers reported a number of fit and finish issues, including poorly aligned body panels, inconsistent paintwork, and doors that were difficult to operate, especially the unique gull-wing doors, which were prone to malfunction. The use of fiberglass and plastic in construction, while innovative at the time, led to issues with cracking and deterioration over time. Electrical problems were also common, with many owners experiencing issues with wiring, the dashboard, and other electrical components. In addition to the high build quality issues, the sheer interior of the Bricklin SV1 was also criticized for being poorly executed. While the car featured leather seats and other luxury elements, the overall feel of the interior was far less refined than what you would expect from a high-end sports car. The dashboard was cluttered and hard to navigate, and the ergonomics of the interior left much to be desired. The car's interior did not have the cohesiveness or attention to detail that you would expect from a vehicle of this price range. The reproduction costs of the Bricklin SV1 were another key factor in its downfall. Despite being priced at a premium, the SV1 was not built with the necessary efficiency to keep costs in check. The car's complex construction and use of unconventional materials led to high manufacturing costs, which were passed on to the consumer. This high price point, combined with the car's lackluster performance and poor build quality, made the Bricklin SV1 a tough sell. The company struggled to maintain profitability, and by 1976, Bricklin Motors went bankrupt, leaving a legacy of a car that had great potential but ultimately failed to meet expectations. Owner's perspective. As a former owner of a Bricklin SV1, I can say that it was an experience unlike any other, but unfortunately not for the right reasons. When I first saw the car, I was drawn to its futuristic design and the novelty of the gull-wing doors. It certainly turned heads wherever I went, and I loved the idea of owning something unique that not many people had even heard of, let alone driven. The concept of the car was so appealing, a stylish, American-made sports coupe that offered something a little different. But once I started driving it, the reality quickly set in. The biggest problem for me was the performance. Despite its bold appearance, the Bricklin was incredibly slow. I remember the first time I tried to take it on the highway, and it felt like it struggled to get up to speed. The acceleration was sluggish, and it lacked the power to make you feel like you were in a true sports car.